Hey, everybody, this is former UFC champ, UFC Hall of Famer Pat Miletich, and welcome to the first installment of Super Soil Superhuman, where we're going to be discussing, everything from soil to humans and everything in between. And I just am very blessed to have two of the greatest experts in the world when it comes to this subject matter. It just happens we were all at the Red Pill Expo. Uh, Great experience for everybody involved, I think.
Yeah,
And
beautiful.
so I just want to introduce number one, Steve Moore, who is one of the absolute top experts again in soil to human expert, and then Doc Will Spencer, who's on the other side, a gentleman from Environautics and Mineral King Life that I've been very lucky to find him and then find Steve. So first off, everything that we were doing here was kind of give people an introduction to the understanding of the types of nutrients that people want in their bodies, not the heavy metal synthetics, but the converted version, the proper probiotics is the term nowadays, and a lot of other components to health. And you were actually evaluating people in real time and giving them their deficiencies, toxicity, their general vitality, how much energy, frequency their bodies were emitting, and all these things. And we don't need to go into the technical stuff, obviously, but kind of give a breakdown of what you're really looking for when you're evaluating somebody's overall health.
Well, using this type of technology that we work with, the quantum scalar frequency testing, uses to identify what's in our outer space, and they can do it just with the pictures of the different planets and galaxies. We actually implement that into the human and animal health as well as soil, which we all live from. And our testing has to do with identifying what we have too much of, is the negative things in us, and what we're lacking to balance the energetic frequencies that we need to maintain our immune system, our energy, and everything else.
Okay. And that, so for a lot of people out there, they're going, dude, this guy's talking about planets. He's talking about this. Ultimately, we are the soil, right, Doc Will? And you want to explain kind of the nutrients in the soil, the people that live in that geographic area, the microbes, the probiotics in the soil, how that all transfers into the human population in particularly that region.
Well, we'll just break it down to the from the earth you shall return, ashes to ashes,
dust to dust.
So right. We are, the third dimensional meat suit that we live in is dependent solely on our environment and incoming nutrition from that environment, or not, for our existence. So the importance of the environment that we live in and take from to for our life force and our elements that make us up are very important.
Yeah, and so I think what I like to do is I simplify things as much as possible. And so what I try to help people understand is the historical references to how agriculture became a chemical dominated business, growing food with chemicals, which are obviously something that, you wouldn't pour a shot glass of any of these chemicals and put them down in front of your child to put in their bodies, but that's basically what ends up happening.
Absolutely.
So in 1971, this is super important for you to understand the style and the implementation of these types of programs and the history. 1971, we get taken off the gold standard by President Nixon. 73, stock market collapse. Farmers are in financial trouble. Experts, quote unquote, experts come out with documentation showing large yields of corn, beans, other wheat, other crops, showing what can be done with these chemicals. And so the farmers who are in financial dire straits say, awesome, I want to become rich, and that's what I'm going to do. And so the Green Revolution starts, and the beginning, well, not the beginning, but certainly revving up the destruction of certainly North Americans' health, Americans and Canadians' health, is in high gear at that point. You want to elaborate on some of that?
It is the beginning of the end of what we have today, with severe degradation. I mean, Dr. Joe Wallach has been saying it for decades that 80% of the illnesses will go away if we would just correct the soils. 80% of our metabolic illnesses that we have today
are because of deficiencies of some kind or another.
Yeah, and so the best way to look at it is one thing that I've observed over 38 years is essentially healing the soil or crops or helping honeybees or cattle or humans is really all basically the same formula
Yes,
for
in the
large
sense
part.
that
Yeah.
you want the biodiversity, and just because somebody says they have a farmland and they're growing crop, doesn't mean it's actually adequately balanced, nutrient wise, biologically wise, or the physics of the quantum energy fields that it takes to really grow sustainable food. And it's depleted so bad from the aflatoxins that are generated from all the glyphosate and the different chemicals that are disrupting the biology in the soil, which isn't allowing any nutrients, if there was any, to even move because they've killed the biology. Subsequently, the cost of all these nutrients that we could use or minerals that are mined that we could be using should be to bring back this energy, life energy in the soil. We've done that with crude oil and coal and different things that people think is absurd, but think about where that came from. And it's liquid compost. And that's what we can establish because of our research farms and things we've been doing for over 30 years, tracking all of this with the quantum energy field of scalar frequencies, not just the conventional lab testing that is flawed in every direction. And it tracks the same thing in the medical industry. They're tracking the wrong thing. They're not paying attention to the details that it takes to set up the harmonious balance in our health. And it starts from all of our soil and water. So that's what we've been doing, and very successfully in all over the country, or actually in different countries all over the world.
That's a beautiful thing. And so it's a homeopathic view to soil, to crops, to everything, not just human health. So, uh, talk about when you grow food with synthetic versions of nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, what that it'll grow a plant. It'll have a somewhat of a yield, obviously, but what's it do to the immune system of the plant? And then what do you have to use because of that?
It severely deteriorates the immune system of the plant and the soil. So therefore, leaving the plant probably pretty green or having one kind of cob of corn, but it definitely does not maximize the potential of the plant. It actually retards the potential of the plant and causes sickness. That's why we have pests, because pests are only there because the plant is unhealthy. It's no different than people. The people are riddled with pests like candida and hookworms and parasites and all these other things because they are unhealthy. The plant has a communication with the pests that actually, when they're unhealthy, they're giving off a signal like a beacon going, come eat me. Come eat me because I'm unhealthy. I don't have what it takes to be a healthy plant. So that is really what's happening when you're using conventional NPK fertilizers and pesticides. Is you're supporting a weak and unhealthy plant in the environment instead of feeding that environment like we've been doing successfully for a long time and creating the immunity. So then the plant has another beacon that says, I don't need you. You can go away from me because I'm healthy. I don't need you to kill me.
That's a great way to put it.
I mean, you want simple. I mean, we're right here.
I don't
That's
need
really
to
what's
kill.
happening.
Yeah, because the immune system
And
makes us all
that's all,
vulnerable.
yeah, and that's all picked up and not just in a fairy tale, but the mirror image of the soil is what our physical health is. We run so many agriculture projects where monitoring the soil and looking at and tracking the animals, watching them because they don't have opinions. They eat and live, eat to live, not live to eat, which is where we're screwed up. But as far as tracking this, the model is a pure mirror of every person and every environment and every country that I've gone to in any geographic area. I test the soils from the higher elevations with rock minerals and paramagnetic energies. And you see the people that live in those environments that their food is grown from, and they're a lot healthier. They don't have what we have as far as the medical challenges that is increasing constantly. So, as Dr. Spencer was talking about, this is exactly what we have to do is fix the soil, make it the mirror image because that's what we have to live off of. So if we don't invest in it, we're gone.
Yeah, and so talk about, for instance, the statistics. Iowa State University does a test years ago on the amount of microorganisms life in a soil compared to even the early 2000s, which was 20 some years ago.
I think it was 1964 or it was the mid 60s anyhow. Ames, Iowa Research did an evaluation of the weight of bacteria in the root zone of an acre of land, and there was a little over 2,200 pounds of actual bacteria in that acre.
So a ton.
Basically, yeah, just a little over a ton. And then they did another evaluation. It was in right around 2000, early 2000s, and there was less than 64 pounds of actual bacteria in that same acre of ground in Iowa. And a lot of that bacteria in there has been force modified with pesticides and commercial fertilizer. So they weren't even naturally identifiable to the ones that were 40 years earlier. So that's a huge degeneration, a ton to what would fit into a potato sack. And I'm instead of 64 pounds.
Right.
I mean that is a oh my God, that is such a fire, a tornado alarm, lights. That should be a national security risk.
It is.
That's security. That's huge going there.
Well, and, in the 90s, I was being trained by Dr. Ed Thomas in functional fitness, but he was also understanding the severity of the situation of Americans' health. And he was saying that this is a national security crisis all the way back in the 90s. It was that bad. And now we've got alarm bells for all kinds of different issues that are being signaled, and many of them false alarms. But one thing, when they talk about, say, for instance, climate change, and they say, there's that argument, man-made, not man-made. Well, there's a lot of different things and variables going on. Overall, we're on a really big planet in a really big universe. There's a lot of things going on. But in terms of what's in the soil for 50 to 70 years, basically, is massive amounts of chemicals. And those chemicals have destroyed the population of the organisms that are supposed to be converting nutrients into truly bioavailable nutrients to help us. But also, organic matter disappears because of that.
Well, there's a statistic. You want to talk about actual tangible information? Go online and look up U.S. Senate document 264 from 1936 and read that. They knew in 1936, the government knew the soil was deficient in 1936 of valuable minerals, that there wasn't enough size to a man's stomach to consume the amount of food to get what that body needed. It wasn't in the soil. It's not in the food. That was, what's that? 88 years ago. They knew this. The government knew this.
Yeah. And it didn't stop. Obviously didn't stop. So 1936 was that document was released. And in 1937 was the Dust Bowl, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's when all the soil died,
They were trying to avoid that.
Yeah.
They were really concerned with the dust. And the Dust Bowl happened shortly after, that document was read into record in the Senate.
Yeah. And it was, I think, 2 to 3 years ago that the Morning Register and a lot of other papers were putting out the next Dust Bowl is coming because of the chemical farming. So you remove the organic matter from the soil, and for every 1% of organic matter, 1 acre will hold roughly 20,000 gallons of water. So if you were to increase the organic matter, how much organic matter is left in soil that's been farmed with chemicals for 50 years, Steve?
We don't have any. There's not a carbon base left.
Right.
That's the hardest thing to pick up.
Yeah. So the point is for every 1%, for each acre, that's 20,000 gallons. 10% more organic matter would be, just in 1 acre, 200,000 more gallons of water would be held, which would create proper evaporation rates and then proper precipitation rates in that geographic area. But as it stands, the soil is clay, especially in Iowa and a lot of other places, but the water runs off to different geographic areas. There's no proper evaporation rates. Therefore, we see all the droughts that are happening now, certainly in the Midwest. And that's how you turn a continent into a desert, is basically what's happening.
So the Department of Ag is really responsible for climate change because they're the ones that have been pushing this form of ag on millions and millions of acres all over the continent.
So we have to
really, you want to talk about,
well, and that's what we want to do is,
So
yeah, go ahead, Steve.
what you're drawing to is, let's look at the history of the, even in the United States, of the Native Americans that have picked up, and the civilizations are completely gone because they were stuck in one place and they depleted the soil, and there wasn't enough life force left in the soil because they didn't have all of the cheating methods that we're trying with chemical fertilizers. They entirely depended on the natural biological activity of the soil, and growing the Three Sisters as such, they just depleted the soil and it wasn't able to support their reservations, and the people that were indigenous in different parts of the world are like that. So I've had the opportunity to test those soils, and it is a mirror of what is, we're accelerating at it like 100 times faster than what they went through. It took them centuries to screw their land up, and we've done it in decades, just about 2 or 3. Because when I started 3 decades ago with this, and the testing I did on soils through Global Earth, or the Google Earth method of taking the pictures geographically and testing them, they're not even close to what they are right now. So we need to make that change, and we've been cheating by using the chemicals, and it's just compounding the problem. We aren't designed by the divine blueprint to live on chemicals. We have everything here to work with, the soil, the minerals, the whole thing. We use a lot of things that come from the ocean because it's the richest part of the whole planet, and we're not paying attention to how that thriving environment is surviving, not just surviving, but thriving incredibly well. And we're sitting here on land and depleting everything that we have around us. So one of the models is the ocean, and there's numerous other ones in other geographic areas that live off of glacial melt. And up in the Andes or Cusco or Machu Picchu area, in the Hawaiian Islands are on top of a big volcanic lava, which is a high paramagnetic rock that life is formed from. The life forms on top of the rock, and that paramagnetic energy is depleted, never even existed in a lot of places in the Midwest of the United States. So we've been working with biology and chemistry, but not taking advantage of the physics properties. And without those in balance, you're not going to get in touch or tap into the quantum world. So all of this, I'm not trying to make it sound complicated. It's actually real simple.
To you.
To me. Exactly. It is simple to me.
We don't want to lose
After 30
anybody.
years,
Stay with us here.
Yeah,
Stay with us here, man.
but we live by that. I live by that. You know,
Yeah,
can test this. I got the animals. I have our own dairy cows that we hand milk, pasterize the milk, so we can keep the energy force and everything, and then we track it by what we feed what the animals actually go to naturally, and we feed our soils on the 80 acres of everything that we're talking about. And I track and watch what the animals are doing, their health, their taste of the animal, the milk they produce, everything about that. And that's the model that we can use for humans. And we use the animals because we don't have an opinion we have to put up with. That explains it. I mean, I didn't have to draw a picture on that one.
that's simple enough.
I avoid that part of it and we go directly to the results.
He loves cows because they can't talk.
Yeah.
They do. They just don't use English.
Right,
Yeah.
right. So I want to ask you, Doc Will. So say somebody who's a gardener and they don't know a lot of what we're talking about. They're going to Lowe's. They're going to Home Depot. Sorry to mention those.
I'm sorry.
Either way, you're going somewhere and you're purchasing things off a shelf that are, for instance, maybe a petroleum-based fertilizer for your garden, for your lawn, for all these different types of purposes, or a farmer whose soil has been decimated by chemical farming. There's no organic matter left in there. Take us through a chronological, step-by-step process of how we're going to assist that gardener or that golf course or that farmer in reestablishing life in the soil and creating plants or grass or whatever it is with immune systems.
We have products that you need to put onto the soil. But you made a good point. Most people don't know that the stuff they're buying at these big box stores are petroleum based.
And wait a minute,
They have no idea.
It says organic.
Yeah, we're going to get to that in a minute.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're going to cover that organic.
Yeah, so the word organic is really a misleading descriptor.
Yeah.
Really bad.
But I'll take you back to step by step.
Yeah.
How are you gonna repair this farmer's soil and get him great yields? Or the gardener gonna grow massive amounts of tomatoes?
Well, you have to put the missing elements back, and the organisms back, and the energetics, get that straightened out. And then a lot of the plant, then once the plant is growing and relatively healthy and has the ability then to draw the nutrition out of the air and the soil, then the plant is actually the remediator or the fixer in all of this, because it's affixing the elements from the air into the roots, into the plant, and drawing it up. And you have to create that area, the root zone. That's where the immune system is lying, right in that root zone for the soil, and then the plant contributes. And so I know Steve's over there chomping.
Yeah, I'm chomping. Well, that's only to articulate. No, just to
go ahead.
What you're talking about, Doc, is that we have to start with where we are at the beginning, and that's where we'll run a test. It doesn't take much, but we'll do a quantum energy soil test. Then when we have that, then we know the good, the bad, and the ugly. What Doc's talking about is trying to set up us as humans, just like the plant is an antenna in the soil, to harvest the atmospheric nutrients, and as well the roots that are drawing it in from the soil. So it's an antenna, and we become the same antenna every breath we breathe. And if we're grounded, and the food we eat is how we receive the information. The information is carried through that your soil has in it by how well you put the diversity of nutrients back into it. So if you mimic a well-balanced environment like the ocean is, and you test those kind of life forces in there, we want the same thing, and we're developing it into our soil with the products that we blend, put together to custom fit your situation in your garden or your agriculture projects that you're doing. And we've picked up and learned so much of this from doing soil remediation on oil spills and contaminated sites that humans have ruined, and they're mining processes that they don't reclaim the land and be able to set up and fix and put it back where it was, are actually better than what it was, because it doesn't mean it would support life even when they got there to make a mess out of it. So with all of that in the history of doing that, we've learned all the different variables to regenerate the biological life in the soil and what it'll take for it to stay alive and sustain that environment, so that we may be here and leave a planet or an environment for our future generations.
Yes, absolutely. And that's the thing that I try to stress with people, is that the truth, we're always looking for the truth in any facet of life, but certainly the soil, the human health, the truth is really important. But so this crazy talk, when you hear of it, I've had enough conversations with chemists and agronomists and horticulturalists and doctors, and these guys are going, wait a minute, the plants are pulling nutrients out of the atmosphere. A lot of traditionally educated people are sitting back going, this is ridiculous. This is hocus pocus, whatever. Give an example of a plant.
I'll tell you, it's
surviving.
Okay. All right. Let me give it a really great one that hopefully everybody's had the opportunity to see happen. On a hike in the mountains, you'll be on a rock cliff, you'll be on rocks, you're climbing over, and there's trees growing all over those things, basically on a sheer cliff. So there's not even leaf litter or anything falling down from the tree to create an organic blanket to live off of, as the floor of the jungle would be. So as well on that, they're on a sheer cliff, so they're not actually in a water retention area. So what the plant with the high paramagnetic rocks is doing, it's like a magnetic charge. The earth and atmosphere is charged. All the elements that we're breathing or the plant can take in to the stomata of the leaf of the plant has a charge to it. One's charged negative and one's charged positive, or North Pole, South Pole. That's a common thing that everybody's played with is a magnet and understanding when you put the two North Poles together, they repel and vice versa with the South Pole. So you want to have an opposite charge. And that's where you set your antenna up with the rock minerals as being paramagnetic. Organic material is diamagnetic. So with the two of them, you don't really need to start a life force with organic material because all life begins from the rock energy. Hence, the Hawaiian Islands or any of the Pacific Islands, that was volcanic and it's still created right now to this day. The volcanoes are erupting and putting lava up. So where did all the trees and where did all the vegetation start from? It started from the mist of the ocean landing on that rock, creating a life force that is very, very strong, drawing the plants nutrients from the atmosphere because it didn't pick it up off the lava. It was using the energy force of that down to a colloidal size in the vascula of the plant, allowing that antenna to pull in the nutrients. And henceforth, over thousands of years, that organic, whether it was moss or algae, lived and died, and it built up to maybe a foot of organic matter. And that's what we want to maintain, and we can still keep doing that, using that as our model. The evidence is right in front of us. We just don't see the forest for the trees, or vice versa.
Right. Beautiful, beautiful example, though. And so that's the thing is the people that are working in the industries of agriculture, for instance, again, we have to understand they're human beings, that they're just trying to take care of their children. They love their kids, trying to pay the bills, trying to feed the kids, trying to get them to college, all those sorts of things. They might inherently still or subconsciously recognize that what they're doing is damaging, but out of love for their children, they continue to do it. What we're saying is that there's alternatives. There's tools, a new toolbox that can be rolled in, and you can immediately cover the cost of taking care of your family, and at the same time, give back from the grave afterward. And that's really what this comes down to is stopping the cycle of abuse. You know, for anybody who's been abused as a kid, your job is to stop the generational abuse, the cycle of trauma, so that your children don't experience that, or as little of it as possible, whether you carry over any traits of fear of heights even. That can inherently be downloaded into your kids, right? And so this is what I'm talking about is generations before us didn't know any better. They abused the soil, for instance, right? And that's kind of what we're trying to change.
Before we close, let's make sure we touch base on the organic certificational aspect to educate people that aren't aware.
Be careful. Be careful.
Yeah, we're going to bring an intervention.
We're going to be gentle, though.
We are going to be gentle, but I want you all to know, everybody that sells something with a certificate on it saying it's certified organic, keep in mind that none of that is done by soil testing or plant or vegetation testing. It's a procedure based on fill out the application and an honor system, so to speak. So there's a lot that needs to be brought out in that, and we're kind of shielded from being able to be too straightforward, I guess.
Yeah, no, to a certain extent we want to, but currently understand that composting facilities are bringing in yard waste that has been treated with a lot of chemicals, of course.
Biosolids.
And then you've got human waste from the water waste treatment facility, with all the human waste that got flushed down the toilet, which has all the pharmaceuticals, ag chemicals, a lot of other things in that, right? And so then those are composted, concentrated, and they call it biosolids, for instance, and they spread it. They're spreading it on agriculture land, millions of acres, mind you.
Millions.
And people are composting because they're aerating their lawns. They're putting it in their gardens. I had a guy who was an agriculture expert, whose wife has autoimmune issues, and all of a sudden she called me because he created an amazing garden for her, and they grew vegetables. She ate one half of a cucumber out of it. The first thing she ate, she had a flare up. It was the worst flare up of her life. And I went over and talked to them. This was a couple of years ago. And I said, well, what'd you use for inputs? What'd you put in the soil? And they said, well, we used the county compost.
Yeah.
I said, do you realize what you've done? Right. So they had to dig out all of that soil and start completely over again. So be aware of what you're putting in your lawn, your soil, on your farm, all these things. You have to be very careful because the EPA is now coming back and condemning farms because they're toxic.
But you're looking at the same biosolids in most 99% of all the parks and recs in the whole country. Use them on their parks and rec and golf courses, public golf courses. And that's where our kids play all of the athletic events on the baseball field, softball field, soccer fields with Johnny playing and Susie. They are using those biosolids on it. And I'm not making it up. That's what I have to fight all the time. Yeah, where we're called in to try to figure out how to fix what they've already, and some of it's just out of common ignorance. They didn't know any better. And other is they know it won't pass, but they keep changing the standard of what's acceptable by the EPA so that a lot of these things can be used and allowed in our food chain.
So it comes to a rise in consciousness of the general public, not just the people growing the food. Everyone has to raise their level of consciousness for this, obviously, to change, but there are solutions, right, Doc?
Absolutely. We're here. The more shows you listen to as we go on, you will be aware now, so you can share with your neighbors and all your friends that there are valid solutions that we've been using for decades.
So, in close, for me, guys, it's an honor to even be around these two geniuses from soil to human health. And that's what this is all about. Again, that's what this is about, guys, is super soil, superhumans. That's what we're creating. So jump on board, and we're going to take you for a ride.
Thank you for your time.
Thanks, Pat.
Thanks, guys.
Yes.